So we have Lil Winter in here. How's it going? Can you speak?
Hola, hola, señor.
What's up?
Yo, what's up?
You know what this hangout is about?
This hangout or
Yeah.
what? This one? No, I just got a link to it.
How'd you get a link to it?
I don't know. I just saw it in a group chat, and me being the idiotic 15-year-old I am, clicked on it.
So do you just go around clicking on random links and don't even know what they're about?
Well, I mean, when I see there's a nigger by the name of Antonio in them, of course I join the link.
Hmm.
You see, I'm what you would call a national socialist, and see, by your username, I'm going to assume you're of a ethnicity. Therefore, I believe I'm going to harass you. Do
Hmm.
you accept my harassment, or should I find elsewhere to harass?
All right. Okay. Clearly just some random troll. Can you speak Lil Winter?
Yep,
All right. What's up? How you doing?
per choice. I'm good. I'm per choice.
Okay. Good. So let me ask you something. Is there any
Mm-hmm.
exceptions you have to your position, or do you believe that abortion should be legal all 9 months for any reason?
Well, I believe that abortion should be legal up until a certain point, like in your pregnancy.
Okay, cool.
Um,
What point would that
yeah,
be?
like 5 weeks.
So why 5 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Why 5 weeks? I'm assuming she dropped out because of the glitch with the Google app with the mobile phones. That is. So hopefully she comes back in. Yeah, seriously, don't come in here if you're just simply gonna troll, man. That was really dumb. Just came in here, with the racist remarks, but I mean, people on the net just are a bunch of losers. What are you gonna do? But hopefully, we can get Lil Winter back in here. 'Cause I definitely want to discuss this a little further. Um, I like to ask pro-choicers about why they think there should be limits because there is an inherent inconsistency in their position. So that's why I like to ask about limits. But hopefully, she'll come back in. If you get removed from here, it's because it's a glitch on Google. It for some reason has a problem with mobile apps. So if you're using a mobile phone to come into this Hangout and you get spontaneously removed for no reason, that's a Google glitch. I don't know why they haven't fixed it, but it's been a problem for at least the last few months now. Well, I'm glad to have you back. Why do you say like 5 months is the limit? I don't know. Maybe she's having problems. She keeps popping in and out. As a correction, I think she said, I thought she said 5 months, but I was informed that she said 5 weeks. So just to be clear, I want to make sure I'm representing her position correctly. Are you good on your end? You seem to be having some issues.
Sorry. My thing's playing up.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, you keep popping in and out. You seem to be having some issues on your end.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Oh,
But
hopefully.
I
Go
wanted
ahead.
to
I'm
ask a
sorry.
question actually.
Sure, go ahead.
Um, do you practice any religions?
Um, I would say that I'm a Christian, but
Yeah.
when you say like practice religion, like what do you mean? Am I just religious, or do I like engage in any particular ceremonies and things like this?
Do you, like believe in God, like follow the Bible, that type of thing?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so do you follow all the rules in the Bible?
Well, I do the best I can to follow God's commands as possible,
Uh-huh.
as much as possible. Of course, I don't always meet His standard. I'm a sinner, and um,
Mm-hmm.
I just do the best I can. Um, I'm not good enough, but with His grace, I can. I, here's the thing about being a Christian. We don't
Mm-hmm.
follow God, just to avoid sinning. That's not just the end goal. We follow God because we love Him and we believe in what His Son Jesus did on the cross for us. But are you asking me this in relation to where I stand in my pro-choice? I mean, my pro-life position. What's the relevance?
Because abortion is a sin in Christianity, in the Bible. And I was just wondering if that's part of the reason you're pro-life.
Well, I would say my ultimate foundation is because of my belief in God and His holiness. I will not deny that
Yeah.
for a second. Sure.
Okay. So okay. Let me moving swiftly on. With uh like when someone's not ready to have a kid, why do you believe that abortion is not okay, even if they're in a really shitty situation where they're taking drugs and stuff? Like, why do you believe that, you know?
Well, why is it not okay? Because it's very simple. Because difficult situations don't justify killing innocent human beings. I think it's pretty much
Um,
that cut and dry.
But at the point, I live in Australia, so at the point that we have the cutoff date for abortions, they're not even fully developed. They're like tiny, absolutely tiny. And it's just like they're not a developed human being. They don't even really have nerves. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're making the decision for them, but you make decisions for minors all the time. I just like don't understand why it's very different, and it's like preventing them from being in a situation that's not healthy for them.
Well, let me ask you something. You say the unborn the earlier stages are underdeveloped. Well, let me ask you this. Let's say a woman wants to keep her pregnancy and she wants to birth the child, right? Um,
Yep.
if she decides to keep her child, should
Yep.
she be, do you think she should be allowed to drink and smoke?
No, I don't.
But why do you
I
care? I
don't.
mean, if it's underdeveloped, why do you care if she drinks and smokes around the point to where it's underdeveloped?
No, I mean, after the cutoff date, I believe. Um, yes.
What I'm saying is,
Um,
during the stage to where the child is underdeveloped and she's drinking and smoking, is that not a problem to you if she keeps her child?
that's if she's keeping her child. If she's not keeping her child, then I don't think there should be a huge problem with that. But with
So you're
like with
telling
every
me that if she keeps her child, it matters that the child is underdeveloped when she drinks and smokes.
yes,
Why does that? So why does development only matter when she keeps her child?
because at the end of the day, it's actually going to turn into a proper human being. When it's going to be aborted is not.
Oh, okay. So does her keeping the child change the inherent nature of that child?
No,
Okay, so if it doesn't change the inherent nature of that child, then why does it matter that she keeps her kid? Like, for example, I can keep a stuffed animal, but the fact that
mm,
I keep a stuffed animal doesn't mean I can't do what I want to it. I can toss it against a wall. I can kick it. I can it apart if I want to. What does me being able to keep a stuffed animal have to do with whether I can do what I want to it or not? So if she keeps her
um,
unborn, why does it matter that she does what she wants, like drinks and smokes?
because the child is actually going to have a future, unlike one that's going to be aborted.
Okay, so you recognize that there's an inherent difference between the underdeveloped unborn and a stuffed animal, correct?
Yes.
So that only works when she keeps her child, and that's what you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about keeping the child changes the nature of that child? The child has
But
the same nature whether she keeps the
the
child or
stuffed
not.
animal isn't, dude. The stuffed animal isn't even alive. Like, there's a difference.
Well, what I'm telling you is, why does her deciding to keep the child change the nature of the unborn? That's what I'm asking you.
Because it's going to have a future and it's going to grow up and it's actually going to long term have issues when it's born. This other one is not going to be born, therefore it's not going to have those issues. And it can't even feel anything. It can't feel anything.
Well, here's the thing. How do
So
you know that that child may die? Seconds after birth. How do you know that child's going to have a future?
sorry, pardon?
That child may die moments after born. Moments after it's born. How do you know that child is going to have a future?
Because it has a future after it's born, dude. Like, literally. Like, it can feel before it dies.
No, all I'm saying is, how do you know that that child is going to survive for a certain period of time to even have a future? Are you just assuming the possibility? that can happen?
Yes, I'm assuming the possibility because there is no possibility if you're going to abort your child. There is no possibility that it's going to survive, like after it's born because it's just not going to be born.
So, in other words, we have to consider the future if we if a woman decides to keep a child, correct?
Yes.
So let me ask you this: if a woman has to consider the future, what about the many women who have brought children into the world, knowing that they couldn't afford to have those kids, and those kids be brought into situations to where they get raised in unstable environments?
Then they should get it aborted, and I think that legally the government should have a choice on whether they get it aborted or not. As
Wait a
someone
minute.
who's gonna be an unfit parent, that I believe, yeah.
Wait a minute, but you just told me that they should consider the future. Are you telling me that they should abort if they can't afford to take care of the child?
Yes.
But if you're pro-choice, then why are you saying that they should abort? If you're pro-choice, shouldn't they make whatever decision they want?
No, I believe that well, pro-choice. The whole idea is that if someone wants to abort their baby, they can. But that also should mean, in my opinion, that the government should also be pro-choice too, which means that they get to choose as well. They have their say in it.
Right. So in other words, if a woman chooses to have her baby, whether the baby ends up in an unstable environment or not is beside the point. She still has the choice to whether she wants to continue that pregnancy or not. So even if the kid ends up in a bad situation, she still has the choice, right?
Yeah.
Okay, if you don't think that choice should be taken away from her, then why do you care if she continues a pregnancy? If that child ends up in a bad situation, why do you care? You say you're pro-choice.
I care because literally okay. I care because this kid is gonna grow up and it's gonna live a long ass time if it's healthy. Um Whereas like you should have the choice to abort. I'm not saying that you I don't know.
So you support the choice for women to freely have their children and put them in bad situations.
I mean, I guess so, yeah.
Okay,
And
so
maybe here's the thing there. Maybe we wouldn't have to have this whole abortion debate if the government um actually supported the people who needed it and they made people feel like they could actually support the child.
here's the problem. You just told me that a woman should think about that child's future if she decides to keep that child. But you just told me that she should not have to think about that child's future. If that child would end up in a bad situation,
At this at
then
this at this stage and this day and age, I think that you do need to do that. But I believe that this should be changing, and I believe that in the future, because this is the future like we're talking about. This isn't today that we're talking about. This is the future. So I believe that in the future we should have more government help because maybe then we wouldn't have to have this whole debate. You know,
let's just check this out. Does the future of that child matter or does her choice matter? Which one?
a choice.
Okay, so if
She
her,
could make. She should be able to make the choice for her child.
right, so if her
It's her
choice
child at the end of the
matters,
day.
right, so if her choice matters, who cares if she deliberately, brings that child to a bad situation? It's her choice, right?
Well, maybe okay. So if she has that option, you'll find that most cases that'll happen. And if she has it, we have a foster care system that can take care of that child if the government feel that they are in an unfit situation. So at the end of the day, the kid's gonna end up all right if it's brought into the world.
Oh, okay. So you're telling me that when women decide to have children, that they're not bringing them into bad situations then?
I guess not. No, not really.
Well, What about what you said earlier about you want to think about the child's future? The fact that you even told me that means that you understand the potentiality for a child to be in a bad situation.
Okay,
And
okay,
now
okay.
you're
Wait, wait,
telling
wait.
me,
Can I ask you something first before
yeah,
we continue this conversation? Okay, you got to get ready for this. All right. Do you believe in the flat Earth?
no, I don't,
Why not?
because I don't think the evidence supports it.
Well, what evidence supports apart from NASA? What evidence supports that um it it is round?
What's
These are all
up?
just assumptions, so you can't really deny something if it's just a fucking assumption.
What connection are you making to this discussion with the abortion debate? That we operate on
I kind of
assumptions?
believe, I actually kind of believe that
If y'all watching this, that was just a glitch for the mobile app. Hopefully she comes back in.
So, what's been going on, Antonio?
Nothing, I've just been talking with Lil Winter about this abortion issue, and she's been cool so far, and I appreciate the fluid conversation.
hmm Let me guess. The thing removed her.
It was just the stupid app glitch. I don't know why in the world Google won't fix this crap.
I don't know either. It's just Google. I really don't know.
Are you playing a game?
Yep. I should
Are
probably turn
you?
it down.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, I don't want to interrupt the conversation, so.
I really do hope she comes back in because it was a great exchange so far.
Yeah. So it was the first guy a troll?
Yeah, he came in here making these racist remarks, but I find it funny. It doesn't bother me. It's all good.
uh, he should meet Black Pack then.
Oh man, Blackpack would troll the mess out of him.
It would be awesome.
Yeah, I would be laughing so hard seeing him get like trolled uber hard, man.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna
I'm
remove
glad
that.
you came back.
thank you. I'm gracing you with my presence.
I appreciate it, but so you asked about these
Why don't instead of we just like abort babies, why don't we just throw them off the flat Earth?
why don't we just throw them off of flat Earth?
We don't believe in the flat Earth. Like none of us in here believe in it.
Why not, Christian?
Well, number one, the biblical support they try pulling up for it is from either from
Did you just say the Bible?
well, yeah, most
Well,
flat
they
earthers
do.
the flat
Some
Did you
earthers
just bring up the Bible, dude? That's not any evidence whatsoever.
dude, let me finish. I understand you're trying to like do like a little like troll, not like you're not trolling per se, but you're trying to do like a trollish argument. But here's like the thing: when we're trying to against flat earthers, there are many scientific. We'd have to change all laws of physics just to make flat Earth correct. You understand that, correct? That all
So,
the laws of physics.
what? Who says those physics are actually real anyway? Who says that those we
Uh,
definitely like physics that definitely works like that? Because we don't know. We don't know for sure. This could all be a computer simulation. So
oh, you're going to Theosophy then? Theosophy, I
we
believe.
literally don't know anything, dude. Like, don't pretend that we do. So why, you know what? Why are we controlling other people's like lives and shit? And like,
well,
why are we
but that's
having a
the
say Why are we having a say in what someone else does with their body and what they do with their child if we don't really know anything?
But that's the thing. If we don't really know anything, who cares if we do? Who cares?
Who cares if you do? The fact that, you know, that kid, like, that everyone should have a choice, and that is like,
Based on what? You say we could be in the matrix. Who says we should have a choice? How do you know
who
that?
says we shouldn't have a choice though?
Okay, so you can't prove either way with the logic that you just gave then, right?
Exactly. So why are we even discussing this? Why are you hosting discussions on this shit if you literally don't know anything? If none of us know anything, at the end of the day, it's a political argument, and it's like, at the end of the day, are we politicians? No. Are we going to have an impact? Probably not. There
Well,
aren't, unless you get into politics, like, you
well,
can't be sitting here complaining about politics. Like,
well, let me put something
Wait,
forth
no,
to
no, no, no,
you.
no, 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 no. With that argument there, because you're complaining right here. You're not in politics, and yet you're complaining about people who want to get rid of abortion.
yeah.
What's with the double
Mhm.
standard?
Let me put something
I am
forth
involved
to
in
you.
politics, actually.
Well, let me put something forth to you, Winter. Let's take your line of reasoning here. Let's say that we really don't know anything, right?
Yep.
We don't really know anything. So, do you think us as a society should stop women from being raped? Yes or no?
No, it's a circle of life.
So we shouldn't stop women from being raped?
No, okay, maybe okay. Well, yes, we should stop them from being raped, but literally Darwin's theory, you know, natural selection, I think we should go back to that. Like, it's stupid. We just have so many rules now, and it's like we don't know shit.
Do you know that?
Wait
Yeah.
a minute. Is Lil like an existential nihilist or something?
I'm trying to figure that out.
I mean, well, you can't really work anything on her any logical basis then, because she's probably a nihilist towards everything.
But why is she trying to impose like a type of standard on you though? Some type of moral standard on you should people should have a choice. Whether she get an ought from an is.
Yeah.
People have a choice to do
Yeah.
this. She's inconsistent, that's what she is. But I'm about to bounce, man. Hey, she says she can't know anything. Just ask her, how does she know that? If she knows that. But I'm about to jump in another hangout, so I'm
All
gonna
right,
catch up
man.
with you. All right, peace.
Yes. This is definitely going to be an interesting conversation if she comes back in.
Yeah, I've never dealt with an existential nihilist before.
Yeah, she turns around and say that we really don't know anything yet. She makes it very clear that we should stop women from being raped and that we shouldn't interfere in other people's choices. Well, if we don't know anything, who says we should even do that? We shouldn't interfere in other people's choices. So what? What if we do interfere in other people's choices? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Exactly. Where does she get that standard from? So at some point, she does believe standards should be imposed, despite her worldview, despite what logic she's putting forth. If she don't think any standards should be imposed at all, then then that's the thing. She shouldn't have came to the table to begin with to even argue her position if she doesn't think standards should be imposed at all.
Yeah.
I really hope she comes back in. I don't know. She's been having a lot of problems. Maybe it's the space she's in. Maybe it's a combination of that and the Google glitch. But yeah, she started going down this line of questioning when like, how do you know this stuff about flat Earth and all this other stuff? I was painting her into a corner, and in order to get out of it, she started, asking these
Things she didn't believe in.
start asking these ad infinitum questions. Well, how do you know this? And well, how do you know this? She was trying to divert from the fact that I pushed her into a corner. She was like, well, before you go there, let me ask you this. I thought that it was really interesting. She didn't want to go down that line of logic that she was putting forth because she pushed herself into a corner real fast.
Yep. She pretty much findangled herself, or she pretty much put herself in a sticky situation.
But that's the problem, man. You get all these people who argue their positions on moral relativism and then say we shouldn't be controlling people's lives. Well, morals are relative. So where do you get this idea that people shouldn't control people's lives if morals are relative?
Yeah. What's for me? What? For example, what's for me stopping committing so many evil acts? If there is no
my morality says I should be able to control people's lives. Hypothetically speaking, their morality says they shouldn't. So who's correct if morals are relative?
Yeah.
If nobody's correct, then they have no basis to argue against anybody controlling anybody's lives, other than they subjectively say that that should be punished. There's no standard of punishment, other than what society arbitrarily would say.
And
For why this is wrong, for why controlling other people's lives is wrong. They just kind of say it is. But they want to pretend like they're exempt from the same evaluations when they attempt to justify abortion. They think it's somehow magically wrong for people to control other people's lives to stop abortion, but they're not in the same boat when they justify killing an unborn child. They don't have. It's called what?
In this situation, she has double standards.
Mm-hmm. There's really nothing she can say to justify her position, but that being said, she was definitely a nice person. I appreciate.
Yeah. I mean, she was kind of nice. She was at least nice and wasn't. Maybe I was a little bit too quick to go on the trolling thing because just with flat Earth.
No, it's cool. It definitely did sound like she was slightly trolling a bit, but I think she did have a legit, genuine basis for why she asked that question. I think she asked. I mean, if we're being charitable here, I think she asked that question in good faith, although it did initially sound like she was coming from a trolling standpoint.
Maybe she was giving us a hypothetical / trollers to make us think type of thing. I don't know.
Could be.
Like, how do we know like the Earth is not flat? Well, we have satellite pictures. Oh no, wait, those are fake. Well, it's like this. It's like an ultimate form of skepticism with like people with that you can't really convince them. They don't want to know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Just like flat.
Interesting. They resort to this sort of skepticism when they get painted into a corner. But when they're arguing their positions on the abortion issue, they don't use this sort of skepticism at all. They're pretty certain that it's bad to want to control people's lives and stop women from getting abortions. They're pretty certain that's wrong. But when you push them into a corner, then they start getting super skeptical. Then they start all of a sudden, want to say, "How do you know this?" So basically,
they just shot themselves in their own foot.
Yeah, they don't question themselves in the same way because they have an agenda, man.
Yeah, I mean, just from this room, you just been proven to me today.
And everybody, and let me be clear, to a certain degree, everybody has an agenda, but the way that they go about putting forth that agenda is intellectually dishonest. But if anybody wants to
It is.
comment, the link is in the chat. Looks like we have Sugar watching in the chat. Would you like to come in and have a conversation, Sugar? Keep in mind that I wasn't the one who kicked you out the room the last time. Didi did, and again, I'm not against what he did, but I'm a little bit more patient than he is. Okay, we have okay. Joe has been in here a few times, had a few conversations with him in the past. What's your position on this issue, man? If you even know what we're talking about.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just cut down my YouTube that's going on.
Do you know what we're talking about right now?
Yeah, it's what, pro-choice? Is that what the argument's for and against?
So, what is your actual position, though?
Or I'd be pro-choice. That would be my position.
We ought to be pro-choice. What does that mean?
Well, I would be pro-choice. I am pro-choice.
Oh, you said you are, okay. Do you think there should be any limits?
I think that it's a complex question because you know, you don't necessarily want a form of birth control. You know, that as soon as you don't want to encourage that you know, that people use it, yeah, indiscriminately. I think people need to know that it's a serious issue, that you know, a termination of a pregnancy is a serious issue, to be treated as just a simple form of contraception.
But here's the thing. Who cares about the should or shouldn't about it? Because the point is, if a woman has that choice, then she does. She can treat it however she wants to treat it as. She still has that choice at the end of the day, correct?
Well, I don't know. Not necessarily. I think you know, you have to. Yeah, I mean, not necessarily. I think ideally, yes, you have a choice, but I think there are certain limitations as well. You know, you can't necessarily terminate a child at a week before giving birth. I mean, there are regulations and laws around that as well. So,
Okay, so when the law decides there should be regulations, then it's not a problem.
well, yeah, long as the laws are reasonable.
Well, who says they're reasonable? Reasonable to whom?
That's an important question, because that's usually it's reasonable to people who have considered to a group of people who make the laws. Then you would hope that they are considered and wise and have thought of all the pros and cons.
So, why do you think it's reasonable to have laws that forbids late-term abortion?
Yeah, because for me personally, because I think that at a certain point, I think that in general, at that point, to me, it's like it'd almost be like murder.
Almost like murder, but not murder.
Well, yeah, I mean that's a fuzzy line, isn't it? But yeah, to me, it's that having a terminating a child, or a week before birth, to me is for me anyway, it would be similar to murder. I mean, they're not technically born yet, so that the definition of murder may not actually be the legal human definition of murder might be applied alive to be murdered. But it's a very fine line.
Are you saying that the unborn is not alive?
Well, I'm saying that to technically, I think you have to be born to be considered a, I don't know. It's a, anyway.
Well, that's a different question then, is it? Like,
yeah.
Born is one thing, alive is another.
I mean, they're certainly alive, but I think by definition, someone has to be born to be considered. I don't know. I don't know. It's an area which I'm not 100% familiar with, so I probably shouldn't comment because I don't know the laws exactly.
But the point is, you do think there's a certain period of time to where it should be allowed, correct?
I think so. Yes. Where that cutoff is, that's where it's a difficult situation. It is complex because it's a very emotive issue. You have to look at the science. You have to look at. I mean, 30 years ago, it would have been unheard of to have children, babies being born at 25 weeks and surviving. Whereas now we can, doctors can do that. So that makes a big difference in people's perception on what's considered viable is born.
Okay, here's the thing. If a woman should have a right to do what she wants with her body and her pregnancy, then why should we even consider all these other questions at all? Who cares if she aborts up to, let's say, I don't know, one day before she's due to deliver?
Yeah, well, it's a good question because I mean it comes down to if someone has a right to do something, is that right unconditional? Do they have a right to do anything they want? And that could be along with any rules we have with regards to rights. Someone has a right to live? Do they have a right to live over at the expense of everyone else on the planet?
But if you're going to advocate for choice, then you're going to have to be consistent in how you argue this position. Don't you agree?
Oh, ideally, yes. But I guess it just shows you how complex and nuanced the arguments are. Is that as soon as you bring up one area, there's often another area which is, I mean, when you infringe on when you're trying to promote someone's rights, you're always going to infringe on someone else's rights. I mean, if you promote the rights of of a woman to terminate a child at any time, then you could argue you're infringing on the rights of that child to exist. So it's always going to be a compromise.
So, are you trying to suggest or argue that the mere existence of the unborn in the womb is somehow a conflict with the rights of the pregnant woman?
Oh, of course. That's why there's the debate in the first place, is that there are people who believe the child has rights no matter what to survive. And that's versus the people who believe the woman has the ultimate rights to choose. I mean, that's where it comes down to the debate. And that's the debate I guess we're having is, as the ultimate say.
Why do you say that the rights of the unborn conflict with the mother? Why do you say that?
Oh, because, I I like to live, and so I'm assuming that the child likes to live. Putting my assumptions of wanting to live onto the unborn child and saying, well, I assume that child will want to live.
Well, okay. Here's what I'm not understanding. You say that you're pro-choice, but you don't seem to have any real way of telling me how this conflict, exists. It's just saying, well, I think this child would want to live, but that doesn't tell me anything. That just tells me what you assume. That doesn't tell me, or do you understand what I'm getting at? That just seems to be just some vague just thing you just threw out there.
Well, I apologise if it seems that way. I mean, abortion is not an issue which I've really had to really. Luckily, I haven't had to really tussle with or really wrestle with. My wife and I were very fortunate. We both had two healthy children. We didn't have to even really consider that as an option. To really make that difficult choice of whether I had to terminate a child. And so I've luckily been sheltered myself to a certain extent from making decisions on that aspect. But in general, I guess I go with, in Australia, where I'm from, the law is that, a woman has the right to terminate up to a certain of certain weeks of pregnancy. After that, it becomes illegal. And
And do you agree with that law?
Yeah, I do. It sounds reasonable to me.
What I'm trying to understand is where do all these arguments to say that a woman should not be able to do this at a certain point come from? Like, who says she shouldn't have that choice when a certain point arrives?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where they originally come from. I imagine it's probably a general idea that as the cells become more and more looking like a human being, I think people would seem to attach more emotion and more ideas that it is human, even though technically, even though it's in one cell, it is still a human being. I think anyway. I don't buy the argument that just because it's one or two cells, it's not a human being. To me, it's a human being.
It is a human being. I mean, it's scientifically verifiable the unborn is a human being.
Exactly, I agree. So, but I think it becomes, I think for a lot of people, it's easier to justify to themselves that a bunch of cells is not going to be, it's easier to terminate the life of a collection of cells than it is to terminate something which looks morphologically more like a human.
It just seems to me that what I'm getting at here, it just seems to me, is that you don't really know why that you would even argue this position that it should be cut off at a certain point. You just kind of adopt that position and don't really know why you hold it.
Well, that's probably, I know, yeah, that'd be correct. I've adopted it mainly because I know that emotionally, that's what it feels right to me, that there's a certain point then that a child becomes viable outside the womb. And I think that's probably the general, once the child can be viable, the baby is actually be able to live outside the womb. That generally seems to be the cutoff at which point you can no longer terminate.
So you just argue this based on what you feel should be, but you don't really know. It's just I mean, you think it seems like you're saying, well, if it gets to a certain point, it appears that it should be legal. So since it appears it should be illegal, it should be illegal. that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I mean that's I know it seems quite arbitrary, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's my point. What I'm saying is, why does all these sorts of um, other extenuating issues come into play if we're just talking about the rights a woman has over her body and her pregnancy? Why do all these other things get thrown in?
Well, I think it's because a lot of people do consider that the child has rights as well, and it's a balance issue between balancing the rights of the child and rights of the mother.
But that don't just happen like late in pregnancy. That gets considered from the jump, from the conception point. But the thing is, the scales tip with pro-choicers like yourselves that those things should be considered more later in pregnancy than earlier.
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, I think because we know that the child can exist outside the womb after at a certain age, and therefore has the impression that it can actually is not so dependent on the mother to survive, and therefore has its own. I guess it has its own autonomy. It starts to be able to exist, and now, I mean, that's putting a value on autonomy. Then, I mean, and which someone could argue that's an arbitrary idea as well. Why is autonomy existing outside the mother's womb important? And I guess that maybe it comes down to people feeling that, when people have a right to do something, it's because they are autonomous. They have a right to choose. It's their choice. It's their free will. We don't want to violate that, and we want to respect their decisions. Otherwise, we are just commanding them to do something. So, I mean, I haven't studied this area very much. I mean, I came here to hang out to discuss this, but also to sort of ask some other questions which I'm interested in getting a Christian's opinion of.
Sure, you can ask me questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing a lot about God's glory, like bringing glory to God, and that a lot of the whole purpose of creation, God glory. Is that sort of what your understanding is?
Yes, that's the biblical position.
Yeah. So what does the Bible give us ideas of what?
What do you mean, like what glory means? I think
Yeah. What would be the biblical definition of glory?
when we're talking about God's glory, we're just talking about, I think a baseline meaning for that would be whatever pleases Him and whatever um, honors Him, I guess. That would be the most, it gets much deeper than that, but, just for a simplistic definition, I would guess what it would be to honor and to please Him. I think when we're talking about um, anybody getting glory, it's about people getting the honor. It's about people getting the admiration. That's just what glory means.
Right. So is the glory? So is it because He's doing things which, like admiration wise, that we admire, that He's doing certain aspects, that God's plan or God's creation is something that we should admire, and that's why it brings Him glory? Or,
To be honest, I don't really know all that. All I know is that He created me in His image, and He created me, for His own enjoyment, and it is what it is. I can't really, answer beyond that.
so why? I mean, do we know why it gives Him enjoyment to have a creation?
Um, Maybe other people can answer that question better than me, but I couldn't tell you why. But I don't really think the question even matters, honestly. But if you want to go down that line of exploration, I guess you can. But I don't really think it actually matters why.
Mm. Because I guess the reason I ask is that, like, when we glorify athletes or superstars or Olympic athletes, I often wonder, why do we glorify them? What's the reason why we hold certain people, certain humans, up to high esteem? And it's usually because they're doing certain things which a normal, everyday, average person cannot do.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, like a human being. Not every human being wins a gold medal at the Olympics, and therefore, when you win a gold medal, it's considered, it brings glory to us, to their nation they represent, and things like that. So, I mean, there's nothing that God can't do. So how does things that he can do bring him glory?
All I'm saying is, I don't really know how to answer those questions. I can't tell you.
Because it's not like creating things aren't difficult for him. I mean, creation wasn't a difficult thing for him to do, because nothing, I mean, God, everything is easy for God to do, isn't it? I mean, there's nothing difficult for God to do.
Right.
How does doing something that he finds quite easy to do bring him glory? I don't understand that.
I mean, like I said, man, I don't really know why that is. But here's the thing. Do you think that question needs to be answered for there to be some sort of, I don't know, some sort of angle you're getting at? Do you think that question has to be answered for it to make sense why we worship God? Do you think that question demands an answer?
Well, I wouldn't say it demands an answer, but it does. To me, it raises in just a question of, why does God require glorification? I mean, creation is a big deal. I mean, he's gone through a lot of effort. It used to be a lot of effort, create this universe, and yet, if we can't even understand what was the purpose of it, which is to bring him glory, but then we don't really understand what that actually means to bring glory to God, it seems like we're being asked to do something which we don't fully understand to do. I mean, do we bring him glory just because he asks us to do it? Are we just purely following his command? Is that the only reason why we really are doing it?
I think, as far as we can tell for right now, whatever he says, whatever he tells us to do, we just do it. When you ask these further questions, why does he ask this? Why does he want us to do this? It seems to me you're asking this, from a particular framework that these why questions, are things which are outside of God. We ask, like God says, we should love and worship him. And then you say, well, why does he say we should do that? It seems like what you're saying is there is some line of reasoning which needs to be resolved, which goes beyond the nature of God. Because if you don't start with God and what he says, then you're asking, outside of him. You're asking, you're basically saying that God should answer something outside of him, outside of what he demands, in order to satisfy your investigation of the answer. So are you really trying to go beyond God to answer this question? Or are you saying this? We have God at this point. God is the ultimate. Whatever he says is the ultimate, not something outside of him in which God has to answer for it to be satisfying to you.
I'm basically trying to understand the why does, I guess, trying to be satisfied to me. You're correct, because I mean, I'm an atheist. I haven't got the Holy Spirit, So I haven't been regenerated. So I don't view God as the ultimate. So I'm still, as a reprobate, I still don't, I guess I don't see spiritual things and I can't understand it. Now, either I have to just wait until God enlightens me and then I'll understand it. But that's, I guess I'm trying to understand it without the Holy Spirit, which I'm finding impossible.
Well, you can't. That's what I'm getting at. If
Hmm.
you are asking, for an explanation beyond God's nature and beyond His decrees and revelation, then you're asking something illogical.
So what for you, I guess for you personally, you don't have to tell me, but what has convinced you that God is the ultimate, and when He says worship me, you have no other choice but to worship Him. You cannot question why you should do that.
Well, He's revealed Himself quite clearly to me in many ways in my life. I see the powerful nature of the scriptures. I see how He's worked in my life personally. I mean, all I can do is just give you, sort of anecdotal evidences of what He's done in my life. But I mean, it depends on what's acceptable to you, and I wouldn't imagine that anecdotal evidence is satisfying.
Oh no, I mean, I'm always interested in hearing people's conversion story to understand when point in their lives do they consider themselves regenerated, and what's it like to have the Holy Spirit. That's because, as speaking with someone who hasn't got the Holy Spirit, I find it fascinating to understand, trying to some insight into what it must be like to have the Holy Spirit.
Well, the Bible makes it very clear that only those who have the Spirit of God can understand the things of God. Those who don't can't. So, I mean, all I can do is just tell you my experiences. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the Spirit of God in you, then what I'm telling you is going to pretty much just fall on deaf ears.
Yeah. I mean, was there a point in time when you didn't have the Holy Spirit that you can reflect on and it feels different now? I mean, is it possible to describe the two different feelings that you got, like pre-Holy Spirit and post-regeneration?
Well, I've been a Christian for most of my life. I got saved when I was 7 years old. So there wasn't really too much I was thinking about before I turned 7. So I really couldn't tell you, pre actually getting saved. I really couldn't tell you much before then. I mean, I was only a kid then. I didn't have these sorts of heavy questions on my mind at the time.
I guess the other question I'm always fascinated to hear Christians to understand is that, do Christians ever have doubts of God's existence? Or once you're a Christian, sign that I had the Holy Spirit is I would no longer doubt that God even exists. That if I even have a whimper of a doubt that God doesn't exist, then that's a good test to show that haven't got the Holy Spirit. I'm not saved. Or can a Christian be saved but still doubt occasionally or very rarely that God doesn't even exist?
I'm not sure how that would actually work with someone who's actually saved, that they would doubt that He exists at all. That doesn't seem to be possible to me, so I would say no.
Okay.
So Mother Teresa wasn't saved.
What's your point?
No, I'm asking, right? Because I thought that salvation was determined by God rather than by anyone else, right?
What do you mean that, like, Mother Teresa wasn't saved? Like,
You didn't know this? She actually had public letters that she had written to the Pope that indicated that she had doubts.
well, the
This is
thing
like very
is,
public, very, very public record.
well, the thing is, I haven't really studied Mother Teresa's life like that, so I don't really No, I can't really answer too many questions about where she stood in her salvation.
I mean, but the point would be, right, is that God
Mhm.
decides who deserves salvation. I mean, under your theology, right? Like, I don't think that it's coherent for a variety of reasons. But if we're to adopt your theology, isn't it presumptuous to even make any statement beyond what is literally in the Bible? Because ultimately, it's all up to God, right?
Well, God knows the conditions of what's in the heart of every human being, and it's ultimately falls, subservient to his standards. So that would be correct.
So, what would it not be? I apologize, it's my cell phone. But wouldn't it then follow then that we shouldn't make proclamations, right? One could have doubts and still be worthy of salvation. We don't know that though.
True. I never said otherwise.
I guess the question is, once you are saved, do you have doubts? That's what I'm trying to
Of
understand. Is that,
course.
but a person can still be saved and have the Holy Spirit in them, but still have doubts that God doesn't exist.
Doubts about his existence, I'm not really sure how that would work. But doubts about other things, I would say yes.
So what sort of doubts does a Christian have about? I mean, because they're going to be saved. Do they have doubts are going to be saved? I mean, do they have doubts that they actually might go to hell instead of heaven? Or what does a Christian have
Like,
doubts
does a
about?
Christian buy health insurance, right? Like, if you live in the U.S., of course, we're savages compared to most of the Western world in that we have to buy our own health insurance. But right, why would a Christian buy health insurance? Why would a Christian look both ways before crossing the road?
Um, I'm not really sure what your point is.
Well, if
Can
okay,
you,
so if heaven is maximally good, right, and we do like I'm willing to take on board that okay, suicide or intentional death is a sin, but beyond that, why take safeguards to prevent your own death? Stuff like health insurance, if that's how if salvation is waiting for you, why be terribly cautious about it?
well, I don't think the biblical definition of faith is that we don't live, according to particular laws and to particular cultures in our society. Rather, that ultimately where our faith lies is in the Lord. I mean, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't get things like health insurance and stuff like that. I mean, even before this modern era, Christians did things like working medical capacities to heal people who got injured and things like this. So um, not only would that be if I'm understanding your line of reasoning correctly, not only would that be a line of reasoning against getting insurance, but it would be a line of reasoning against even getting medical treatment in general.
Yeah, I don't see why, beyond sort of the selfish want of existing in this finite form, you would get help, you would get medical treatment, right? It's nothing if not for your own comfort, right? So I'm wondering, like, theologically, and I'm not saying you have to have an answer for this. I don't know is an acceptable answer, but I've not heard a convincing one.
Well, I've said this once, and I'll say it a million times, and you've heard it before. I'm pretty sure proof is different than persuasion. So, I mean, it really isn't
I don't see how that's relevant.
beyond.
I'm not asking for proof. I'm
I'm
or to
not,
be
I wasn't
persuaded.
done. I wasn't done.
Well, I'd prefer it if you didn't
I
straw
wasn't,
man what I'm
dude.
asking.
No. Okay, Sammy. Let me finish, man. Here's the thing. My job is not to convince you. I am under no obligation to. I can, try to give you the best possible reason that I can, but whether it's convincing to you or not is beside the point. I'm under no obligation to give you a convincing argument.
Yeah, nor did I say any. I actually, this makes me question whether, and I'm not trying to be rude here, but whether you were listening to me. because I said, like, first off, like, you're going to have to do a heck of a lot more work for me to be convinced of your theology. That's no offense to you, but that's just the reality. Like, I've various reasons why I'm not a Christian,
No,
but
I gotta do a thing.
like, but I'm that okay. The proverbial you, not Antonio Fletcher. Come on, I'm not being literal here.
I'm not talking
Um,
about literal. What I'm telling you is I ain't got to do a thing to convince you of anything. I ain't got to
I
do
did.
all this
Okay,
work.
so let me finish my sentence. Um, Let me finish my thought. Excuse me. What I had asked is like, what is you like? I'm not going to adopt your theology, but I'm wondering how your theology deals with that fact. Like, I'm not asking you to convince me. I'm asking you for what your theological answer is. Now, if it's I don't know, that's perfectly acceptable. Like I said before.
Well, I think it's similar to you know how we just live our life. I mean, we ultimately believe in the grace and the salvation that God gives us. Does that mean we don't eat? No. Does that mean we don't go to school? No. Does that mean we don't have treatment? No. I mean, Jesus did all these things himself. So um, I don't really see the relevance of you even asking about this or where it connects.
It's just curiosity. I said that multiple times. Um, I mean, that's fine, but there are, people like Christian Scientists, for example, who refuse medical treatment because they believe that they should leave it in the miraculous hands of God. So they don't do things like blood transfusions. So, like, I'm wondering, just saying, oh, well, this is how we live life. Um, I mean, that seems a bit ad hoc to me, right? Like, I can clearly lay out why, like, I seek medical treatment, right? And part of it's sort of selfish motivation. I want to stay alive. And if that's your motivation, right? Like, I don't think selfishness in and of itself is a bad thing, right? Um, that's fine. I'm just wondering, like, is this to you a personal decision or a theological decision? Or, how do those, maybe an even grander discussion is how do those even intersect?
Well, Scripture makes it very clear that all the treasures are found in Christ. So um, if we look at why we would get medical treatment, I would say it's because it would be ultimately to understand, um, I would, how do I put this? Um, and this may not be a satisfying answer, but I would think a lot of these things, for why we would get medical treatment, for why would we go to school, why would we uh, work to move up in the employment ladder and all this stuff. I would guess the reason why we do these things is to explore who the nature of God is. Um, like we break our leg and we seek medical treatment. I think that in a sense would explore uh, what things about his nature. That would explore how he made us. How when we get hurt, how what he created, is engineered to fix itself, engineered to build itself whole again. I guess that would explore part of his design and his creation. Moving up in
I,
the employment ladder. You know, it would explore, where we trust in him to get to certain positions of employment. I guess in one way or another, these things are just simply an exploration of the treasures that he affords to us. So that would be the best answer I can give. It may not be a satisfying answer. I understand that, but I think stuff like insurance, medical treatment, all that stuff is ultimately just to explore who God is.
how do you find out who God is by having a broken leg and getting treatment?
Um, there are certain things that we won't ultimately be able to answer, but um, again, like all the treasures of knowledge, wisdom, and things like this are ultimately found in Christ. Like when we are engaging in particular discoveries on how the human body works and things like this, um, we just, we may be marveled as to why, the body is engineered to fix itself when there's an error in it. And we just say, wow, this is amazing.
I don't know
Look
why
at,
that requires a broken. I don't know why that requires a broken leg, though.
I'm not
It
saying it
seems kind of
requires a broken leg.
It seems. Well, I asked a specific question, so it's kind of weird that it's not. I mean, that's fine. It's not getting answered, but yeah, I don't necessarily know. You know, here's the thing: is how do you know that you're exploring the God of mind, or the mind of God? Excuse me, because by your own admission, God works in mysterious ways, right? So you might be exploring, the mind of God, but it might just be happenstance of human decision.
When we say God works in mysterious ways, we don't mean that that God isn't there at all. We mean that when He does work, we may not understand exactly how He's working, but He's clearly working, whether it's known to us the specifics of how He's doing it or not. So why do you even bring that up?
Well, I think that you again. I'm trying to be careful with my wording, but again, you're misinterpreting my words. Is if we don't know the motives of God, right? If we don't have access to His, his whole scheme for things, right? Like, how do you know that you breaking your leg is something that actually explores something about His mind, or it's just some random happenstance?
It seems like we don't have like this sort of ultimate like knowledge of God. I would say that like he hasn't like revealed, ultimately everything to us. I would not question that. But because he hasn't revealed everything to us ultimately doesn't mean that when we explore new things and when we see stuff like how the human body works, as how a broken leg would heal. When we discover new things, just because we don't know ultimately everything about his nature doesn't mean that when we do explore new things, that's not him. That's not, because we wouldn't even have stuff like the ability to heal ourselves. We wouldn't even have stuff like the ability to cure diseases and stuff if it were not for how he engineered the world to begin with. So we don't have this ultimate, knowledge of how he does everything. But when we do figure things out, we're exploring him because he is necessary for this sort of knowledge and these sorts of discoveries to begin with. That's the Christian position.
Do you believe He's necessary for those discoveries? Is it just because He does, He's the creator of the universe? Is that why you believe He's necessary for those discoveries?
I believe he's necessary because, I mean, you've heard this argument over and over again. He's necessary because everything which exists is contingent upon him. Knowledge is not possible without him. So,
How do you demonstrate that everything is well, I guess you're how do you demonstrate that everything's contingent on God?
well, it's very simple. If there is in the Christian worldview, he is the ultimate. There's nothing beyond him. Therefore, logically speaking, everything which exists could not exist without him pre-existing. I mean, that just follows logically in the Christian worldview.
Well, I'm not asking for the Christian worldview. I'm asking, from a neutral position, how would you demonstrate that?
Well, that's impossible from a neutral position.
I mean, okay, so then you can't demonstrate that everything's contingent on God. Oh, okay.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that that depends on whatever worldview you're coming from. The mistake that you're making is that you're assuming that wherever you're coming from is neutral. It's not.
I mean, in the sense that no person is completely neutral, but in the sense that I'm adopting, classically few assumptions, right? Like, you haven't actually made an argument where you could dispute whether I'm being neutral or not, right? You've just said you've declared what the Christian worldview is, and then you've moved, and then you've moved past that. So, I mean, you could maybe attempt to demonstrate it and speak outside, speak from where you could go from someone else's worldview to yours.
Well, the problem is you're assuming that you can even reason against my position to begin with without the Christian worldview. How would you know you could do such a thing?
Because I take the laws of logic to be presuppositions.
So, what does that mean? I take God to be a presupposition. And
Well, God, I just have to say that God's an unnecessary presupposition. Whereas I can say that, in order, I take a very pragmatic view of these things, right? So if I don't take, if I'm, to have a view of the world that actually works in terms of predicting experience and allowing me to reason about experience, right? I need at a foundation the things like the laws of logic, right? And things like accepting, for instance, that I have like I don't know how I would reason about the world without accepting the idea that I actually do have thoughts and have perceptions, right?
mm-hmm.
I don't. This is the reason why I take it on as a presupposition. I don't see why I don't see what I gain as a presupposition that God exists.
Mm-hmm. But you do understand that you do have presuppositions whether you accept the Christian God exists or not, correct?
Sure.
All right. So what I'm getting across to you is that it just seems like whatever you're doing, um, you're just operating off particular assumptions in your worldview if you don't have the Christian God in it. So you're not really um, saying why that the presuppositions that you hold are basic and mine isn't. You kind of just saying,
Because
well,
yours
just
doesn't.
grant.
I
Go
did
ahead.
say it. I did actually. Sorry for interrupting. I did actually say it. It's because your presupposition doesn't add anything, right? Like, so I want the most minimal. My goal with, and like, you don't have to obey this goal, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to have as few um, presuppositions as possible, right? I want the most streamlined worldview, right? Like, I could take on
Mm-hmm.
board as just a presupposition that 2 + 2 = 4, but I don't need to, right? Like, there's no reason for me to. I can arrive at that conclusion by using reasoning. I don't really see what adding God as a presupposition does, like, other than just simply affirming some emotional stance.
But who says adding like fewer assumptions, however you would do that in your worldview, who says that adding fewer assumptions makes an argument more or less logical? Who says? You?
Adding fewer, I didn't say logical. Again, I'm going from a pragmatist point of view, and also, you look at Occam's razor, right? The thing that uses the fewest unnecessary assumptions is usually the correct one. Now, granted, that's when you have ancillary, you might have some ancillary factors in there, but in general, right? And so, just from a practical perspective, it's easier to reason about the world if you have as few presuppositions as possible, and also it's a more productive and coherent line of reasoning, because I don't have to worry. The fewer things that I take on board as necessary presuppositions, the nice thing is that it makes it easier for me to find incoherencies, right? Like, it makes logic easier because I don't have to worry about my presuppositions. I have less of a chance of my presuppositions conflicting with each other, because if I make them as minimal as possible, then the rest of my worldview just follows from them, right? They're the foundations, right? If you're building a house, you want as few, you want a balance between the fewest and the most sturdy, support beams in the house, for example. I don't know shit about building houses, but, or stuff, sorry. I know you don't like swearing. I don't know anything about building, but I do know that you want the strongest and the fewest number of support beams as possible.
I think that in my worldview, even according to the logic that you just gave, that I just say God is basic. I think that's very basic and very minimal.
Well, I don't see how anything flows from God.
Well, that's that. Here's the thing: if you're operating in the Christian worldview, how would you get beyond God? But of course, if you don't accept that, then you wouldn't be able to see how anything flows from God if you deny the Christian worldview.
Well, presumably, if you're trying, I mean, if this is, so I'm not quite sure. So there could be two things that you're doing here. You could, and again, I'm not sure if your goal is just to sort of declare that, oh, I just take this, I just take this on as my presupposition, and that's it, and that's that, and just sort of stubbornly declaring victory. I hate phrasing things in those terms, but if that's your goal, I mean, okay, that's fine. I don't really have much to say to you, but if your goal is to actually be convincing and to provide a convincing rejoinder to any argument about your faith, I don't think that does anything, right? Like if you were able to account for the laws of logic, right? Like that would be a huge deal in the philosophical community. That would just be a huge deal in human interest of understanding the world. Like it seems to me to be kind of odd that you wouldn't want to explicate that.
Let me ask you something. Do you believe that reality is relative?
Well, why are we switching topics?
I'm not. I'm asking this for a reason.
What do you mean by relative?
Like for example, just subject to one's personal judgments and things like this. Um, like uh, let's take a moral issue for example. If we talk about something like rape, would you say that morality is relative in that
Why are we
sense?
moving from epistemological foundations to moral relativism?
Here's what I'm getting at, man.
I mean, are you going to provide justifications, or is this just going to be an interrogation of what I believe?
But dude, here's what I'm getting at. Um, when you say that I should provide you a justification, when you say that, what I'm getting at is I want to know where the this baseline justification you're asking for is based on your own assumptions. And if it's based on your own assumptions, why should I comport to your assumptions?
I mean, because presumably you want to be convincing, or you could demonstrate why my assumptions are unjustified. Like, I mean, I think you tend to. I want to say this. Like, it kind of seems like you're assuming that I'm going to be stubborn and not change my mind if I hear something convincing. I can assure you the opposite is the case. If you provide something convincing, but just asking, oh well, why should I do this? I mean, you're under no obligation to do this. I'm just asking out of curiosity. That's all I'm asking.
Because here's the thing: when we get to the bare bones of like really investigating this thoroughly, all these sorts of justifications that you asked me about come back to your own assumptions, which I have no obligation at all to acquiesce to.
Yeah, I never said you did. I mean, you're kind of repeating yourself here. I've already stated that I agree with that. I'm asking you what it could be the case that you actually have a sturdier set of properly basic beliefs than I do, and I need to really think about, how I structure my belief set. That's completely possible. That's the only reason I'm asking. Like, I mean, if this is, and Ozzy likes to use this term, if this is is just playing hide the ball where you don't have to justify your position, I mean that's fine, but I don't really know why you would then offer it as an apologetic.
But here's the problem: when you say I have to justify my position, that line of thinking like assumes that there are particular points in which you would argue from to say that this needs to be justified. Correct?
Right. It is. It. I mean, it just assumes that there's a meaning for the word justification.
And here's the Christian worldview. We accept that God exists and that He is the ultimate justifier. Nothing goes beyond Him. You can either accept that or reject it, one of the two.
Well, how
If you
does
don't
God
think that's
justify things?
how, that's an incoherent question because the reason why it is because when you say, how does God do this? It seems, well, I'm not going to say it's incoherent, but it sounds incoherent. But correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like what you're saying is we are looking for a sort of justification beyond God's ultimate nature in which we appeal to make sense of why God is doing this. Is this what you're getting
That's
at?
not at all what I asked.
Oh, okay, okay, cool. I
Like if
appreciate the
I
correction.
mean, yeah, I mean, like if you ask, how do I justify, for instance, that how do I justify the church Turing thesis, right? I can actually provide you I can discuss. It's not relevant here because I did it for a class, right? I can tell you how that is justified, right? You do what's known as a proof by contradiction, but and you quickly see there have been other similar things like Russell's paradox is very similar, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, etc. Like if I ask you to justify why you think 2 + 2 is 4, right? There's a clear methodology, right? Like if God is a justifier, right? Like how does God actually justify things?
Here's a simple answer. I don't know. And I would say that I don't know how God would do it, but all I can tell you that is God being the ultimate justifier. Um, Things are necessarily justified just out of the very paradigm of who He is. How He does it, I can't tell you. I don't know.
So wouldn't that be something that's very inferior about your worldview? Because for me, the things that justify things are things like evidence, things like reasoned arguments, right? Like it seems to me like I don't know how you can declare that God justifies things and then it's a complete mystery how things are actually justified. Because if it's a complete
Well,
mystery how things are justified, how do you know anything?
well, the fact that we don't know the particulars on how God justifies things does not mean that things aren't justified by His nature.
What does it mean for God to justify something by his nature?
See, this goes back to the question this goes back to what I asked you about. Um, I don't know how you would ask that question beyond who God is. Um,
So
Here's the thing,
every question, every particular in an argument is dependent on who God is.
because if you just take God as um, the starting point, and you said He is the ultimate justifier, either you believe that or you don't. He doesn't have to tell you how He's the ultimate justifier. It just is what it is. He just is the ultimate justifier. He doesn't have to tell you how He is.
I mean, yes, he would, though. Like, that's the thing. Like, just declaring that he's an ultimate justifier, I don't see what that gains you. I could say that, this vaporizer pen sitting next to me is the ultimate justifier. It doesn't seem to gain anything in the argument, right? Just declaring that it's an ultimate justifier. I mean, it would seem if we were to compare our two worldviews, mine would be vastly superior because at least I can explain to some degree how justification actually works.
So you can explain how that thing would be the ultimate justifier.
No, that was a parody argument. I don't actually
Oh,
believe
right,
that.
right,
Like
right.
you're just declaring that God justifies things, but that's not an account of justification. Like that
Well,
wouldn't fly. That wouldn't fly in a math class. That wouldn't fly in a philosophy course.
he declared it. Either you
How
accept
do you
that or
know
you
that?
don't.
But
Well,
again, I mean,
have you
again,
heard of
this goes back to. But Antonio, don't you see how this kind of goes back to what I said earlier, of where it's just kind of a game of hide the ball, right? Where you can just sort of declare, like, if you just want to say, you know what, I believe this, I believe it by faith, I don't, I'm not going to argue about it, then that's fine, right? But the second that you want to make it about a logical discussion, and then you do this, it makes it kind of difficult for someone to actually, like why even do apologetics then?
well, like I said, man, either you accept what God has revealed or you don't. I mean, here's the bottom line. Like for example, if I ask you, let's say your mother has a middle name. I don't know if she does or not, but let's say your mother's middle name is Mary.
Jane.
Okay.
It's Jane, by
Okay.
the way. But that's,
Okay, cool, fine. If I ask your mother what is her middle name, and she tells me Jane, then I can either accept what she told me or not. How do I know her name is Jane? Well, she revealed it to me.
or her
Either
middle
I
name.
accept,
Her middle name. Her first name is
yeah,
Sarah.
yeah.
But well, actually, you could go into the census archive. People do this all the time, right? This is how background checks work. You can actually look these things up. So, like, you can actually justify things like that. It's like you
Well,
just seem to
sure.
be arguing you seem to be arguing a particular case where with God we don't have to justify it. I can think of something where I would never have to where you would never have to justify it. That's something that's known as an incorrigible proposition, which
Well,
basically just means a statement of feeling because I don't have access to your thoughts.
here's the thing. If we go to the census that you're talking about, it eventually gets to a starting point to where you don't go any further. Like, let's say the census thing that you're talking about is the final stopping point right there. Whatever is contained in the records, either you accept what those records say or you don't. You can do one of the two. You don't
Or
go
you can
beyond that.
investigate more, right? Until you get to the bottom of the situation.
But don't you would you not agree that it gets to a point to where you can't go any further?
Yeah. I don't see why God would be in it. Like, but here's the thing, right? Is you haven't actually provided why God would actually be that point, other than like I can actually provide an account for why my beliefs are that point. Like my presuppositions are that point. Like I don't know, and there are philosophers that argue about this. Like I'm not taking I'm not taking a
Mm-hmm.
stance that's accepted by everyone. Um, like I don't see how
Mm-hmm.
you're doing that though, right? Like presumably there's some justification for why God would be that starting point. Like I can justify why I think the laws of logic are properly basic, but that's whether or not you accept that, of course you're right. I mean,
So why
at least I can
is
provide a reason for it.
here's the thing. Why is it that once we get to the stopping point, whether it be the consensus, whatever the stopping point is, of what your mother's middle name is, um, we get to the point where we stop here and we just say, okay, either we're going to accept this as what the truth is, or we don't. Why is whatever stopping point you have? Why is that more justifiable than the stopping point that I have? Either you accept that guy is the revelation, or you don't.
I don't
And in
see
the
what
same
I mean
way,
because
either accept
you're
whatever your stopping
you
point
just
is for your
asked me
mother's middle name. Either I accept that or I don't.
okay, so you're asking two different questions, but I'm gonna distill
No,
it
I'm
down to your
not.
original question. Your original question is why are my stopping points superior? Stopping points actually are able to more allow us to more reliably understand reality in a coherent way, and predict and improve future experience. And that's why I would say that your stopping point doesn't provide anything other than you just saying so.
So, because who says that any particular stopping point have to provide anything though? Who says it? You?
Well, presumably anyone that wants to have an account for why the world is. Like, if you don't care why the world is the way that it is, I mean, that's kind of I would find that to be a psychological curiosity. But I mean, again, like, I don't. Maybe I can, because this has kind of become an interrogation for me. I can ask you a question.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. Yeah.
Which would be, okay, yeah. Which would be, I mean, why are you so satisfied with what seems to be just a vacuous point, right? It seems like you seem really, I do think you're a curious person, Antonio, which is why I find it odd that you want to just say, well, I declare it's God, therefore I win. Which seems to be sort of the, and I know that that's sort of like a playful, I want to say that's sort of more of a playful way of stating it, but that is essentially what you're doing.
I got it. Well, I don't say, I get the sentiment of where you're coming from, but that's not actually what I'm doing. I can't state anything without the Christian God declaring it to be, and I accept that or I don't. As a Christian, I do.
Why? But why do you like? But here's the thing: is why? Why can't you reason about things other than that? I can explain why I can't reason without the laws of logic and other things that I take on board as properly basic.
Well,
it just kind of seems like you're just simply, again, like you're doing the same thing, which is that you're just saying, oh, well, take it or leave it. Well, then that's not an apologetic. It's not an argument. It's just sort of a weak statement of the case.
That makes no sense when you say you can do it without, what did you say? You could do it without explaining the laws of logic, or you can do it without
That's
using,
not
what did you say?
I said that
I'm asking about what you said. I'm not saying you did.
I can explain why my properly basic beliefs are my properly basic beliefs without just declaring it. You seem to just be satisfied with declaring it, which is fine, but like there's nothing to that stance, right? Like if I just said, well, I accept my, if I just, acted like you, for instance, because if I just said, well, these are my properly basic beliefs and that's that, right? Like you would say, well, you're being kind of a stubborn jerk about it, aren't you? Like you're not explaining anything. You're not allowing yourself, the open-mindedness of being able to modify your stance. Like it seems to me that when we have this conversation, there's one of us that's open-minded, and then there's another one who just wants to declare that he has the answer, and that it gets a little frustrating.
Well, how do you know I'm just declaring it? How do you know?
Because you haven't provided. Because, like, for instance, if you were to explain how God actually provides the justification for other beliefs, then, I mean, I would be, that would sufficiently answer. You haven't said that, though.
I don't know, like, how in God's nature, I don't know how he does it. But what I'm telling you is I don't need to explain that how to say that he does justify it. I don't have to know the how.
I mean, doesn't that kind of leave a huge gap in your worldview, though?
Well, I don't operate from your worldview. I operate from mine.
I just said I am operating. I'm doing an internal critique on your worldview. I am operating. So let's just say that, let's magically declare that God justifies these things. Like, I don't see how that's intellectually fulfilling at all. Right? Like, I don't see what we actually gain intellectually by saying, well, okay, snap of the finger, now God justifies it, right? Like, that's essentially what you're saying. And I don't see what that actually adds, right? Like, I don't see if I step into your worldview and I'm like, I don't really know what I gain in terms of knowledge, right? And now let's do the opposite thought exercise. Let's step into my personal, my worldview. Step into my worldview. Okay, let's remove a presupposition. Let's remove the idea that I'm actually having one of my presuppositions is that I'm having an experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let's. Oh well, then we can't even make sense of reality if we remove that, right? We
Mm-hmm.
remove the law of non-contradiction in terms of a law of thought. It's a way that we think about reality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then reality doesn't make sense. I don't see a similar ability for your presupposition. I don't know what we gain or lose by it. Like, I don't see why what your presupposition actually leads to.
But you assuming that we should have to gain or lose something when you ask the question to begin with.
Yeah, I'm just asking, for an intellectually fulfilling account. If you are satisfied with an account of God that isn't intellectually fulfilling, that's your business. But I would
Well,
say that that's
you say it's not intellectually fulfilling. I don't say that.
well, I mean, I don't know how. I mean, then okay, the moon is made of cheese. I just declared it. Therefore, that's an intellectually fulfilling account.
Well, if that's what you want to do, that's fine with me. I don't care.
And that seems like it's such a strange thing to say. I mean, you so you're genuinely fine with just declaring that this is what I think, and no argument would ever convince me.
I'm fine with the fact that the God of the Bible has revealed himself and that either I accept this revelation or I don't. As a Christian, I'm perfectly fine with that.
So then, why be an apologist?
Um, here's the thing. The Bible makes it very clear that we should be able to we we give a defense for the hope that's in us. That's what the Bible instructs us to do. But that
What
doesn't
if
mean that we do it. That doesn't mean that we do it apart from the wisdom of God and what He has revealed. Because the truth is, we can't do it without the wisdom of God. We can't do it apart from Him. So we can't just operate on this neutral ground to build up to Him to argue for Him.
So
I know that you got people
are
who
you are
argue
you
with.
critical of people like G-Man and true empiricism who actually do take an evidential route towards proving God?
Well, I don't have a problem with evidential arguments. I just say it's not biblical if you separate those from God. But
What does it
if they
mean to
do
separate?
separate it,
What does it mean to separate something from God?
for example, let's take a lot of the arguments that William Lane Craig gives. At best, all those arguments do is just build up to a concept of God. It doesn't build up to the Christian God at all by any stretch of the imagination. He has other arguments to where he finishes that bridging point, but the basic arguments he give, doesn't prove or build to the Christian God at all. It just builds to, general theism. So,
Except for the resurrection, which is one of the arguments he classically presents.
well, yeah, that's like
And
him
personal
finishing.
revelation. I mean, those are two things that he presents at nearly every debate that he's in.
Well,
Unless
that's him finishing.
unless the debate, I will say, unless the debate's about a specific topic.
Yeah, that's him finishing. That's him adding other particulars to bridge it to the Christian God. But I would say that apart from God, I wouldn't use evidentialist arguments. I wouldn't just
What is
try
it?
to just make an argument just to prove that just theism is true, because that doesn't again, just proving that theism is true doesn't say anything about the Christian God at all.
But okay. So, but then you offer ancillary, like it's a cumulative case, right? Like you don't necessarily, there's not one. I mean, apologists would argue that there's not just one simple case. It's, God's a complex thing, and to cover all of the facets and make a convincing argument, you need separate arguments, right? There is no area of knowledge where you can tackle every single topic or even one single subject with just one argument, right? This is actually why intelligent design is terrible, because its answer is just, oh, designer. Whereas, when you compare it to something like evolution, there's hundreds of thousands of different papers and many, many, many different hypotheses and ideas out there that go into explaining it, because there's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, it seems to me that you're reducing the concept of God to, it's supposed to be this simple thing that we just simply declare. But rather than, it seems to me that someone like Craig appreciates that God is a complex concept, and that if you want to prove a complex concept, you're going to need more than one way of proving it.
Well, actually, Craig did say at one point that he does think that the concept of God is actually very simple. It's I can't remember the exact quote, but he actually think a basic idea about the nature of God is very, very simple. He would use a number of different arguments to, like you said, the cumulative case, but he doesn't actually take God, as a complex thing.
Well, he says that God is omniscient, omnibenevolent, and omnipotent. I mean, that's a whole different topic. But I
Right,
mean, I
right.
would say that that's a fairly, even though you can say, like, but by the same token, I can say that, evolution is that populations change over time, right? Like, we can say that there are pithy ways of saying these things. It doesn't mean they're not meaty concepts. I'm sure that if I asked Craig, he would agree with me that it's a meaty concept.
Well, yeah, the subcategories of these issues can get very complex. I don't deny that.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. But like, I
Right.
just I don't, like, Antonio, like, I want you to make good arguments, and I would like to see that you do, actually do good, attempt to do good philosophy or good science or what have you. But it kind of seems like you're unwilling to do that. Like, just declaring that it's the case. I mean, do you honestly think that that's convincing to anyone?
Um,
To any, and if so, like, when I'm forgetting the exact verse, when it says to offer a defense of the faith, I mean, that's not a defense. That's just a simple declaration that this is what I believe. Like,
I don't agree to that characterization of my position. Like, there's three forms of revelation. There's innate revelation, natural revelation, and special revelation. Um, there's these three bits of revelation that he's given to us, and based off these three bits of revelation, um, he has revealed to us prior who he is, and beyond that, we can accept it or we don't. It's the same thing that I asked you about your mother's middle name. Get to a baseline point to where you just can't investigate any further, and you just get to a position to where you either accept it or you don't.
yeah, that seems, I mean, but again, like, we can say this about any proposition, right? Either you accept the proposition or you don't accept the proposition. But there's difference, right? If I, all of the, if you're going to ask me to accept all of the things that go along with believing in the Christian God, including the fact that I don't think the Christian God is coherent. I mean, you're asking me to accept a whole hell of a lot on just say so, on just you can accept it or you don't. I mean, that doesn't, like, that. I can't imagine that you don't realize how much of a cop out that sounds like.
No, it's not a cop out. It's just like like I told you, I don't know how you're gonna get around this. You get to a point to where you just can't investigate anymore, and then you accept this is what it is, or you don't.
Well,
Plain and
here's the
simple. I don't. You can apply that to what I just said. We got either you accept He's revealed Himself in these three forms of revelation, or you do not.
well, presumably you could provide a convincing case, right? Like, this doesn't seem like it's a convincing case. It just sort of seems like, well, you can accept it or you don't. Well, okay. Like, here's the thing, right? Let's, I can say that about gravity, right? But I don't see you jumping off the Willis Tower anytime soon, right? Like, you accept it or you don't, I can say that literally about anything. So I don't see
That's true. I
like
can,
it just
reject
seems like a
reality, but I'm still going to uh, fall and kill myself if I jump off the Sears Tower. In the same way, you can accept or reject God, but if you reject God, that doesn't mean you won't be judged.
well, I mean, presumably you'd have like here's the thing though, is like I don't just accept my properly basic beliefs the way that you accept God. In fact, the way that you accept God is far, far worse and far, far less justified.
Well, who
Because I can
says it's worse? In whose worldview, yours or mine?
well, worse in the sense that if it means to be if by when it comes to reasoning, right, worse in the sense that I should say it has less justification because it has zero justification, whereas I can actually justify. Now granted, these are inferential justifications, right? These are things like the coherency or things like the fact that it allows me to just live life, right? Like I can actually do that. Instead, you're just kind of leaving it at this just blanket, like you can accept it or you don't. Like that's not intellectually fulfilling. It's not
But
even. It's actually a conversation stopper
but
if
but
you
you're
think
not.
about it, because it doesn't like philosophically like that wouldn't. I mean, that wouldn't get accepted in a philosophy course. That wouldn't get accepted, in a philosophy textbook. Oh, God is the grounding. I mean,
I
no. People would want to actually discuss the concepts that underlie these
I
things.
really don't. I really don't care about
But then again, if that's the case, then why do apologetics if you don't care?
I I really don't care about what men decide they want to accept beyond God. I don't really care what they have to say.
Well, then
Um,
why be an apologist? This isn't an apologetic. This is just
Here's the thing.
you just reifying what you already believe.
Here's the thing. If you're going to ask me why I believe what I do, then I'm going to tell you why. But that
You did
doesn't mean
already.
that the ultimate.
You did already, and I mean it was just a declaration that God is the ultimate justifier, and you said you couldn't explain why. So I mean that isn't like maybe there's another reason you believe in God, but that's not a reason. I'm sorry.
Apologetics exist um, for any number of reasons. I mean, it's not just Christian apologetics which exist. You can do apologetics for a number of different subjects. But when people are going to question a Christian on why they believe what they do, I'm going to tell you the reason why I believe what I do is because God is the ultimate justifier. And
Yeah, that's but
without
it's
God,
not.
you can't reason at all.
Can you demonstrate that?
Well, for example, um, if you deny the Christian God, then how do you account for the laws of logic?
I take them on as properly basic. Why is that? Is there an inherent like you could prove this in a variety of ways. I would suggest doing something like a proof by contradiction. Are you familiar with that?
Proof by contradiction.
I'm going to take that as a no by the tone in your voice. Um, it's just like in a reductio ad absurdum, right? Uh, this is like saying, oh, okay, if I take on your assumptions and then I examine them, they lead to some sort of implicit contradiction, right? Like people did this with Euclidean geometry, right? We're all taught Euclidean geometry. Turns out Euclidean geometry doesn't work once you introduce the concept of curvature. And it's fairly easy to demonstrate this, but for example, if you take the axioms of Euclidean geometry, how many degrees do the internal angles of a triangle add up to? You know that?
I'm not aware. I wasn't like the best math student, so I couldn't tell you all that.
Yeah, given some of the gaffes being said about pi, and I think it was one of your hangouts, or maybe it was one of True's. I'm not surprised. But it's 180 degrees. Well, that's actually not true if it's on a curved surface. It's actually, I believe, with a positive curvature, it's more than 180. Negative curvature, it's less than 180. Um, but um, but the point would be, right, is like we can actually examine why those why the foundations of an idea don't work by stepping inside that idea and accepting for the sake of argument. Just saying, oh, well, you don't have an account of this. I mean, that doesn't actually, that'd be an argument from ignorance, right?
Well, here's the thing.
I mean, you're like it. I think you would go a lot further as a presuppositionalist if you actually explained how God justified these things rather than just declaring that he does. I don't see how you're better off than someone who doesn't have a justification.
Well, you don't explain how the laws of logic work, yet you accept it, though you not?
I do explain how they work. I mean, A equals A, right? Law of identity.
You're using logic to explain it.
I mean, why is that incoherent? We use math to explain math.
That's circular reasoning.
It's not circular reasoning. Self-consistency, right? Like,
No,
are you saying that like
assuming logic to
linguistic?
prove logic, you're engaging in circular reasoning.
So so linguistics is circular reasoning because we use language to describe language.
If you use anything to demonstrate itself as circular reasoning,
Again, so would you say that the field of linguistics is circular reasoning?
if it's using it to show itself, yes, it's circular.
What do you mean by using it to show itself? I didn't use the laws of logic to demonstrate themselves.
Yes, you are. You are.
No, I didn't.
You
I
are,
said I take them
you are,
on.
you are assuming them prior to arguing for them. That's circular.
No, I don't. I never argued for them.
So,
You said you don't know what's in them, and then I explained what the content was, and then you shifted. I mean, you're going to have to be a little bit more precise with your wording.
no, what I'm telling you is, if you are operating off the laws of logic, in order to account for them, you would have to use logic to try to account for them.
No,
That would be circular.
I don't believe that there's an accounting for the laws of logic.
You don't believe there's an accounting. How do you know that?
I don't. You are welcome to convince me with an act. This is why I would be open to your
So
case
you
if you made
assume.
one.
So you just assume the laws of logic have no account. You can't verify that, so you just take the laws of logic without even verifying
Well,
whether
I
you
mean,
can
again,
account for
I
them or
don't
not.
know, right? Like, do you know exactly how every circuit in your computer works?
Nope.
But you realize that it works. So you just go from there, right? Like, but you'd be willing to hear an engineer go into how they work, right?
Sure, but here's the problem.
That's how I view it in this scenario, right? Like, I've
But here's the
examined and I've studied these things at some length, and I haven't found a good justification for them.
but here's the problem. You just told me earlier that I'm just kind of asserting and I'm just taking, God as the starting point, and I'm really not explaining anything. But you have a different, inconsistent criterion for the laws of logic,
Where
so
have
you
I been
contradict
inconsistent?
yourself.
Where have I been inconsistent?
That you just sort of take the laws of logic without actually explaining them or accounting for them.
I didn't. Yeah, I said. I mean, explaining something and accounting for something are different things. But so you've been using those interchangeably. So that's been my mistake. Here's the
Look,
thing: is I can actually explain how those things work, right? I can explain how the law of non-contradiction works because A equals A in all scenarios, right? I can explain how it works. Doesn't mean I necessarily have an account for it, and I'm open to someone actually presenting an account for it.
but you can't do it
Whereas
without assuming logic prior to it.
Okay, you didn't I'm going to assume by you interrupting me, you weren't listening to what I said, so I'm going to repeat what I said.
Finish, please.
And please try to listen because you've conflated this several times now. I can explain how something works. Now, just because I'm using language and logic to do so, that's just self-consistency, right? Like any system should be able to work, consistent to itself. Like that's not an issue, right? Like that's people use math to explain math. People use, that's a good feature of systems. But the what am I trying to say? but you know, I can explain how these things actually work and actually do provide things. But in terms of accounting for them, I don't have an account for them. So I take them on as properly basic. Now, I would be more than happy to actually have an account for them. That would make it actually much better for me, but I'm accepting reality as I see it, right? Like, I'm not, you know, I would request that you don't assume that I think like you, because I don't.
Oh, I know that. I know
I-
that. The Bible makes that very clear.
I actually want to understand things, and I'm not satisfied with just declaring that it's the case. So if you have an account, but you don't actually explain how we gain anything from God, like, I'm perfectly fine with you taking it on board, and even I would consider taking it on board if you could demonstrate how you actually gain anything from that. I
But
can
you-
explain how I gain from the laws of logic. I mean,
But
it's the laws of inference themselves, you know.
you're
You know,
satisfied with not accounting for them.
I mean, yeah.
So, why should I have to account for God then?
I didn't ask you to account for God. I asked you how God accounts for things.
So, when I tell you that that God is the ultimate justifier, you're not asking me to account for why He's the ultimate justifier.
No.
Well, to ask me how He justified things is, yeah, you're literally asking me to account for why He's the ultimate justifier. You're literally doing exactly that.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not. I mean, very simply, the laws of logic, I can explain how they work and how we can learn things from them if we take them on board. But, like, I can easily do that. I don't have to account for them by doing so.
So here's the thing. If I take God as the starting presupposition and you take the laws of logic, you saying that I don't have to account for why God explains things, and you don't have to account for why the laws of logic works. So
I do. No, stop. Okay. Antonio, I'm going to ask you to stop playing fast and loose with the language. Because, I mean, then it just evolves into a word game. An account is an explanation for why something is a presupposition. An explanation in this context is how that thing actually works. I can explain how something works. A presupposition you should be able to explain how something works. The reason you take something on as a presupposition is because you don't have another account for it.
how do you
I'm
explain
not
how
asking
logic
you to
works
have an
without
account.
using logic?
That doesn't self-consistency. It doesn't matter.
So you use the laws of logic to explain how the laws of logic works.
You use the laws of mathematics to explain how equations work. It's not. I mean, you're not saying anything, right? Like, do you accept that math works?
Of course I do.
Okay. I mean, we're talking about how you justify math, right? Like, you just like.
So you engage in circular reasoning.
It's not circular reasoning.
If you use it to justify it, it is circular.
I'm not using it to justify it.
Yes, you are, man.
No, I'm not. I'm not talking about justification. I'm talking about how it works. I'm talking about explanation. I mean, seriously, Antonio, like, I'm starting to get, I've
why are
had
you
to make this
moving it?
distinction several times, and I'm starting to get impatient here. So
Dude,
I would appreciate a little bit of effort before I lose my cool.
Dude, why are you moving this?
I'm not moving it. You're being very inconsistent and unclear in your thinking.
What I'm telling you is, if you're going to argue, if you're going to just take the laws of logic, in order to, here's what I'm getting at. I have a God as the starting presupposition, right? You asked me to explain how God is the ultimate justifier, right? But that's literally asking me to that's literally no different than me asking you to show how logic justifies logic. It's the same thing.
I'm not asking for justification of why God is the ultimate justifier. I'm asking for even just an example of how God justifies things. I'm asking for the mechanics. I'm not asking for the justification.
So,
You've already explained that you accept it without any justification. So, I mean, that's
what I
like
tell you is
asking
that
for
I'm not familiar. I told you I'm not familiar of the mechanics, but you just said that we don't have to be familiar of the mechanics of how a computer works to know that it works. So I could just say in the same way, well, God just works.
I mean, we can actually look at how a computer works and have good reasons for why. I mean, you're taking that analogy way out of context. And
Okay,
like,
so
I'm actually amazed at this point. Like, all I'm asking for, like, I can explain how, and I'm glad you're getting this distinction. I can explain how something like mathematics or something like logic works, right? Like, I can explain how it works, and we can talk about whether, you know, the assumptions that underpin it are justified or not. And we can talk about whether they can be justified, right? Like, I don't think the laws of logic, at the present moment, I haven't heard a justification for them. That doesn't mean I won't. Maybe you provide a great argument. I
well,
don't
here's the
think
thing.
that will happen. But the thing would be is that explaining the mechanics of how something works is different than explaining the justification. I already know that you don't have a justification for why God is the ultimate justifier. And that's because you've said so. So, like, I'm taking you at your word and I'm saying, okay, but then how do we go from there? Whereas I can explain how inference works once we accept the laws of logic.
No, that is because you've denied God from the outset.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. I mean, you're just saying that. Nothing that I've said. I'm actually stepping into your worldview and saying, okay, let's take this on board. How does that justification actually work? What's the mechanics there?
So where have you stepped into my worldview where you have shown that it doesn't work? At what part in my
I didn't
worldview?
say it didn't. I didn't say it didn't work. Where did I say
Okay,
that?
so what's the issue? What are you talking about?
That it's vapid. That you're just simply declaring it's the case without actually adding anything productive.
Well, here's the thing. Are you
Do you disagree with that?
are you here's what I'm trying to understand. Are you looking for an explanation of the mechanics as a necessity?
What do you mean by necessity?
Like I tell you that God works, but you say, you know, how God works. You say you're asking about the mechanics, right? Are you looking for the explanation of the mechanics as some sort of necessary baseline to accept, you know, God's revelation?
Well, I mean, it would show why your presupposition is necessary, for one thing.
So wait a minute. If I
Like, it would
if
be,
someone doesn't
part
explain
of
the
it. Would be,
mechanics of how
it would be part of, like, actually, it would be actually a decent chunk of explaining why you have a necessary presupposition.
I can tell you that God answers prayers. I can tell you that God heals people. I can tell you that
And none of
He's
that would be
influenced
related to
lives.
what I said. So
Right,
it would all be irrelevant.
I'm getting there. I can tell you that God has influenced, you know, the lives of countless numbers of people. But you know, the little mechanical details, like let's say he heals my broken, I get a broken arm and he heals it. Mechanics of how and let's say he did it by one of his miraculous ways. I couldn't explain the mechanics on how he miraculously healed my arm. I couldn't tell you that.
Yeah, that would still be an intellectually unfulfilling explanation to me.
Well, that just goes
So
back to
I mean, I can explain how, I mean, I've done truth tables, right? Like, I've done, like, here's the thing when you take university level math,
mhm.
and anyone who has, to verify this is you actually start with the basic assumptions of whatever field. Like, you actually prove, you say, okay, these are the rules by which, you know, we do number theory or set theory or something. and also I think someone in the live chat's asking for the link. But
Well, I'm about to close this out because I'm actually getting tired anyway. But
no problem.
go ahead and finish your
but
point.
the point would be is that like you actually reason from these things and you explain like, okay, this is exactly what I get from this, right? Like it's and it's really cool that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: we don't, justify. There's no reason to justify the axioms of, let's say, set theory. You don't actually. You just say, "Oh, look, this is what I can do if I use these rules." And the same thing goes for logic, right? You just go, "Oh, cool. That's what what I can do with the laws of logic." I mean, you seem to refuse to do that for God or admit that you can't. Now, if you can't, I do think that's a serious problem for your stance. And in terms of using this type of way to get to God as a conclusion. And I would suggest evidentialism as being, at least, I find it at least a little bit more convincing and a little bit more honest in that way.
Well, here's what I can tell you. There are other people who can unpack the presuppositionalist argument better than I can. So if my understanding, wasn't convincing to you, then it is what it is. I don't claim to be the best presenter of the argument itself.
Antonio,
So
I'll
maybe
say this: it's not you. It's the argument itself. I've never gotten a straight answer, so I do want to say that I'll give you your props. It's the argument. It's not you. You've actually been pretty on point with most of this stuff. With the exception of a few mix-ups, just because I think we were both being a little unclear with the language.
that's fair enough. But in any case, man, I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, all I would say is, like, I actually took. The funny thing is before all this presuppositional stuff came online, I actually only took. So I've only taken 2 philosophy courses, but one of them, do you want to know what it was?
What's up?
Theories of truth.
What does that mean? What does that entail?
So what that means is it's how do you say something is true? What does it mean for something to be true?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of this presuppositional stuff, I was like, well, these are all really dumb questions and I'm saying that like not at you, but at the whole more of the Sci 10 and DD type of version.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it was really funny to me because it was all these questions I had actually written like term papers on. But basically, like, imagine that what truth is it's a property of statements, right? So when you say that something is true, you're basically saying that, oh, it is true that X, right? It is true that Sam is 5'9", right? How do you actually assign that property, right? Like, how do you actually say that truth describes a statement?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a really hard question, and there's no consensus out there among philosophers. It's actually pretty evenly split among a bunch of different views.
Okay. All right. I guess that's something I have
So
to
we're
look
not going to
into.
solve we're not going to solve
It
the
seems
problem.
interesting, though.
We're not going to solve the problems of philosophy anytime soon.
All right, man. But I'm getting tired. I gotta get some Z's,
All
man.
right,
But I
well,
appreciate you
I'll
coming
let
in,
you.
man.
All right, I'll take off. Thanks for having me, Antonio. This was fun.
All right. Have a good night, man. All right, folks. I appreciate y'all watching. That was an interesting exchange, but I really gotta get to bed and crash. But stay tuned for more hangouts and look around the corner for Bring It Pro Choices 9. Take care, everyone. God bless. Peace.